Welcome to this explainer on internal family systems, or IFS. Today, we're unpacking a framework that is literally a game changer for understanding your own mind. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed by a negative emotion, like sudden burning anger, or just this heavy, sinking lack of motivation? And then, right after, you get totally frustrated with yourself for feeling that way. Yeah, we've all been there. We judge ourselves. We see these emotions as massive roadblocks getting in the way of our happiness. So today, let's dive right into why that happens, and more importantly, how we can totally transform our relationship with our own minds. It really begs the question, why do we fight our own feelings so hard? Think about it. When an unwanted emotion pops up, our knee-jerk reaction is almost always to shove it down. We're constantly told that if we can't snap out of a bad mood, we should just push it away. So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, it looks like pouring that third cup of coffee when we're stressed, or doom scrolling Instagram for an hour just to numb out, or maybe slapping on a fake smile and forcing toxic positivity down our own throats. But spoiler alert, ignoring these feelings, it only works for a very short time. We tend to lean hard on these quick fixes, Netflix binges, scrolling, forcing ourselves to look on the bright side. Honestly, even meditation can be misused if we're just using it to dodge negative feelings. But the internal family systems approach, it flips the script entirely. Instead of fighting the feeling, IFS asks us to do something radical. Listen deeply. It suggests that every single negative feeling actually has a positive intent behind it. And if we can understand that intent, we can actually heal the core wound rather than just endlessly managing the symptoms. Let's put it this way. Dealing with negative emotions on the surface level is exactly like taking your car to the mechanic because the check engine light is glaring at you and the mechanic just smashes the light bulb. Problem solved, right? Obviously not. The light isn't the broken engine, it's the warning sign. And that's exactly what your negative feelings are. They are your brain's check engine light. They're desperately trying to tell you something absolutely crucial. So, to figure out what that check engine light is actually trying to say, we need to pop the hood and meet the mechanics working inside our minds. We call these our inner protectors. IFS teaches us to look at our feelings not as abstract concepts, but as little mini characters with highly specific jobs inside of us. Let's talk about these protectors. These are the parts of us that use difficult feelings as a shield. Let's say you just cannot find the motivation to start a new project. Well, that demotivation might actually be a protector part stepping in to ensure you don't risk failure or rejection. Or say you snap and get angry really quickly when you feel ignored. That anger? It's a protector trying to enforce boundaries because maybe in your past, blowing up was the only way you could get people to actually listen. Sure, they might be using outdated, messy strategies, but their underlying intention is always to protect you. Okay, so what exactly are they working so hard to protect? That brings us to the exiles. Exiles are these fragile, deeply vulnerable parts of ourselves that carry past pain, shame, and trauma. When these parts got hurt way back when, the pain was just so overwhelming that your protectors essentially stepped in, grabbed them, and locked them away in the dark. Now, those protectors work overtime, using anger, jealousy, or numbing out, specifically so you never ever have to feel the intense pain of that exile again. To really wrap our heads around how these protectors and exiles interact, let's step inside the inner kingdom. I want to share a super vivid metaphorical story straight from our source material that illustrates this perfectly. It's a story of exile, and ultimately a really beautiful transformation. The author of this account realized they had this incredibly strong positivity part. This part demanded that everything be joyful and happy all the time, absolutely terrified that if it wasn't, total sadness would take over. In their inner landscape, this positivity part looked like a smiling, benevolent queen. But deep down in the dark, the author found an exile. It was a sad, trembling young prince locked away in a literal hole. The positivity queen had imprisoned this prince because his pain was just too big of a threat to the kingdom's forced happiness. Now, as the author kept exploring this inner kingdom, they stumbled upon another protector, the loyal servant. And this guy had a secret. When asked what he actually did all day, the servant admitted he worked in the shadows, constantly to prevent the kingdom from being thrown off by changing moods. He totally bought into the idea that the ends justify the means. He felt it was his absolute duty to suppress any and all negative emotions just to keep that positivity queen safe and stable. But here is where the real magic of IFS comes in. Instead of fighting this loyal servant, the author did something unexpected. They thanked him. They thanked him for his incredible, exhausting dedication. By just acknowledging his positive intent, the servant finally felt safe enough to let go of that role. They actually held this internal ceremony where the servant tossed his old uniform right into the fire, completely dropping the belief that the ends justify the means. He chose a brand new role as the listener, guided by a simple, beautiful new truth. Love and presence create harmony. And because of that shift, the positivity queen could relax and become a joyful kid again, and that exiled prince was finally welcomed back into the daylight. That story is an amazing example of healing, right? But let's be real, getting there is rarely that simple. Our protectors have been doing their jobs for years, sometimes decades. They do not hand over the reins easily. So let's break down exactly why they resist our attempts to heal them so fiercely. These protectors carry some deeply ingrained fears. For example, a protector might be terrified, thinking, the exile's pain is just way too much to handle. When that happens, we have to reassure them. We tell them, hey, we can negotiate this. We can turn down the volume and go as slow as you need. Or maybe they fear being useless. If we heal this, what happens to me? We offer them hope by giving them a new, non-extreme role. And if a protector literally thinks this pain is their entire identity, we gently remind them that parts are not their burdens. We can put the heavy baggage down. The fears don't stop there either. A protector might worry, look, if I stop blowing up and being angry, people are going to walk all over us. We have to reassure them that true healing actually builds clearer, much more confident boundaries. Sometimes they'll even panic and think there's no actual core self to guide the ship. But we remind them that the self is never missing. It's just been hidden, like the sun behind heavy clouds. Finally, if they're freaking out that inner healing means we suddenly have to blow up our external lives, like quitting our jobs or moving cities, we remind them to just breathe. Inner healing doesn't require immediate external changes. The key takeaway here, even if a protector's fear seems totally irrational to you, you have to remember it feels 100% real to them. Okay, so we've talked a lot about doing the reassuring, but who exactly is doing all this talking? We keep bringing up this concept of the self. In the world of IFS, accessing yourself is the absolute ultimate goal, because the self is the true, steady, compassionate leader of your inner kingdom. Now, the self is not just another part of you. It is your undamaged, natural, calm core. Think of it like the eye of a hurricane. It's perfectly still. It doesn't carry the baggage, the extreme beliefs, or the trauma of your other parts. It is pure, unadulterated understanding. And honestly, the most comforting thing about the self is that, according to IFS, it is literally indestructible. It cannot be damaged, and it is always, always there. When the self takes the driver's seat, it naturally brings out what IFS calls the 8 C's: calmness, curiosity, compassion, clarity, confidence, courage, creativity, and connectedness. When you can approach your own inner world with these qualities, the internal tug of war just stops. Your parts finally feel heard, valued, and safe. Instead of judging your anger, you get curious about it. Instead of aggressively shoving your sadness away, you hold it with genuine compassion. So, the million-dollar question, how do we actually tap into this self-energy when we're in the middle of being triggered? Well, the sources give us a really straightforward process. First, pause and breathe. Physically release that clenched tension in your body. Step 2, notice your parts. Acknowledge whatever you're feeling and do it with kindness. Step 3, gently ask that active, buzzing part, like your anxiety or your anger, to just take one step back and give you a little breathing room. And finally, step 4, invite curiosity. Literally ask your inner world, what does this part need from me right now? When we successfully access that self-energy, we open the door to something pretty incredible, actual, lasting emotional peace. We stop playing whack-a-mole with our symptoms and start getting down to the root causes of our pain. This happens through a really fascinating process called memory reconsolidation. Here's the bottom line. We have to heal the old wound that the feeling is trying to protect. Because if we just keep suppressing these negative feelings, they don't just magically disappear. Oh no, they mutate. They turn into physical symptoms like migraines or panic attacks, or they show up as irrational phobias. But by using the self to safely revisit and reprocess these painful memories, we literally rewire the brain so it doesn't need that old, outdated protection mechanism anymore. Now, a quick reality check from our sources. Digging deep into trauma is not really a DIY weekend project. To do this safely and effectively, you really want the guidance of a trained professional like an IFS therapist. I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. The next time you feel a massive wave of an unwanted emotion welling up, try looking at it through a completely different lens. What if, instead of fighting your negative feelings, you actually listened to them? What if you treated them as loyal, completely exhausted protectors who are just trying to keep you safe? By choosing curiosity over combat with your own mind, you might just open the door to a profound and lasting peace. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you rule your inner kingdom with a bit more compassion.